Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and it is the 24th of March, 2025. It's kind of interesting, kind of amazing that it's the 24th of March because this is the first day I actually have to go teach a class in person at the university where I used to work. So my mind is definitely on that today. Sometimes I don't sleep well before I have a first class, but in-person class. Online classes don't really matter because those are set up, they're asynchronous, students sign in when they sign in. But this one, I have to have all my notes together, and this is not a subject I've taught before, so it's kind of like that. And good morning, Kathleen. Good morning, Alistair, and morning/afternoon where you are. And yeah, and Kathleen will certainly know, and Sudha is on. Good morning. Yes, Kathleen will certainly know that what I'm going to be teaching is in the realm of information literacy. It's actually an entire university course on information and understanding information. And Alex, good morning. So yeah, got everybody back here. Well, not everybody. I'm sure there's a few others who might join us. But it's, yeah, so it was just weird. And I woke up this morning with a headache and I was like, motherfucker, I'm like, I'd better not have a headache today. The last thing I need to do is stand in front of a classroom of new students and be like, look like I've, been hit deer in the headlights kind of look, which tends to happen when because really it's like when I have the headaches. And good morning, Kelsey. Good to see you. Glad you're here. It tends to come through my eyes. Like for some reason, my eyes itch, they water. I get dry eye, and so then you just kind of look like, that tends to be the way my headaches manifest. So I don't have one at the moment. So knock wood, cross your fingers, do whatever for me because I don't need to have that today. My class is until 4 in the afternoon, but yeah, so this is my first day. So I've been trying to do a lot of prep for that. And I had some, unexpected conversations and stuff over the weekend that kind of, I don't want to say, it didn't derail it because I was pretty much already prepared, but it does mean I'm probably going to go in a little earlier today to make sure I have things set up, and I have to finish my grading. I'm a little behind on my grading for my other university students. So I have 90 students now. Even without the ISFM, I have 90 students now. So yeah, so I have to try to get all of that together today. And that's certainly been the primary thing on my mind at the moment. But I had very interesting dreams last night, and I had a dream about having 2 teeth pulled. Now, I don't know if Lila's hanging out in the background here anyway, but I do know that certainly in Italian folklore, pulling teeth has to do with, they only see that as kind of an omen of death. So I don't know what that means exactly. So I guess we'll find out. I don't really want to assume too much, but I do know that teeth are connected to Saturn and Saturn energy. Because Saturn is definitely connected with the bones in a lot of ways. So yeah, so that was kind of an interesting thing last night, and the hoopla around it. Actually, it was more like having the teeth pulled, but you know how it is. It's like you have to have the anesthesia first or the Novocaine, and then it was almost like having to wait for something to kick in first before that would happen. So I don't know. I sometimes tend to have these dreams. I don't get worried about them, but I just, I see them. I kind of make notes of them. I always advise people to do this too. If you have dreams that are really weird in that sense, and you think like, oh my God, what does this dream mean? You can, I always say make notes, write them down. And then if there is a subsequent thing that comes up, you can go back and reference your notes and say, okay, because sometimes too, in retrospect, we tend to misremember what things are. We're sure that we had something, and then you go back and you read your notes and you go, okay, maybe it wasn't exactly like that. So yeah, I always advise that people do that. But yeah, so I thought what I would do today for this live stream is kind of just delve into pulling some cards, doing some readings, and seeing what kind of topic presents itself. Because my focus is all kind of on this class, and that's not really the subject of this. I will tell you though, I just think there's some very strong irony, and maybe Mercury retrograde has something to do with this. I don't know, but there's some very strong irony that I'm going to be teaching a class that's connected to library, that's connected to information and communication. Information studies and library studies are often connected to communication, right? This is information, how we exchange information, how you research, right? And do that kind of thing. But what's always really very funny about it is that like the communication has been really horrendous. Yeah, and again, not that anybody there hasn't been nice. Actually, everybody has been super nice. Even HR has been super nice. Okay, everybody's been fine to me. So it's not that people are being mean or obstructive or anything like that. But it's like I'll get an email that'll say like, okay, the first thing you need to do is log into WebAdvisor and do this. Then or you have to go into Paycom and do this. Now, mind you, there's no links to any of these things. It's just like I have to just sort of magically know, because it's not like you can search the website and find it. Okay, that's the thing, because these are all hidden in secret employee websites, which I was able to find only because I used to work there. and then they've created some new ones. So, and then as it turns out, I went into the one where I'm supposed to log in and get my class list. And I remember the old interface. It was like, there was like a student interface, there was an employee interface, and there was a faculty interface. And when I log into the faculty interface, all I have is student access. I'm like, and no class list. I'm like, okay, well, that's really not very helpful. And I know it's not the regular IT department that handles that. So, you know what I mean? But again, if I didn't already work there before, if I was just a new I'd be totally lost. And there's nothing. It's like you have to sign in and onboard. It's some mysterious site, and we're not going to tell you where it is. It's kind of funny. But I feel like it's an initiatory ordeal or something. Like I'm running through hoops. It's like, here's the secret thing. Go find it. In any case, I think I've sorted through most of it, and I was able to pull a class list from somewhere else. So I think I'm actually okay. But I mean, it does mean I have a few more things I have to print off and do. So yeah, as you can see, my mind is kind of on that this morning. But I think what I wanted to start with was our cards. These are the Between Worlds cards, which I like very much. Now we are moving into a high energy period this week. Certainly, there's a lot of predictions. There were like G3 solar storms and things going on. And solar storms, sometimes it's interesting because we often think about those as kind of magnifying our energy, right? As making it, sort of heightening our intuition. But actually, if you think about how it operates, it tends to do the opposite. It's because you think about satellites. I mean, that will disrupt satellite feeds. That will that can actually interfere with you getting information. So it's interesting that we think about these storms and kind of what they what that might be meaning for us, and again, in the middle of a retrograde too, it's hard to know what's what. But yeah, there's a lot of this. I think they said 23rd, 24th, and 25th, there was a tremendous amount of energy. And we are moving into a solar eclipse at the end of the week, because obviously lunar and solar eclipses go in pairs. And so we have one on the 29th. And on the 30th, Neptune moves into Aries for the first time. So this is going to be a real high-powered week in a lot of ways. So we'll have to see where that shakes out for all of us. But it is definitely a very high-powered week. Now, okay, so the two cards I've pulled initially for us are the Valley of the Quest. Okay, so I'm going to, again, I like to read these from here. That's the first one. So I'll show you guys a picture of it. And good morning, Joanne. Glad you can make it with us today. Valley of the Quest. Okay, so this is the card. And it basically shows this bird. Let's see if my eyesight will work today. Yeah, it's almost like he's standing. Actually, it's funny. I was talking a little bit about going through a maze, and he's kind of like in this little box right here, but there's this little pathway up towards this little tower. And the meaning of the card is thus. The hero's journey begins here. Okay, so here we are talking about beginnings, Aries season, right? In the Valley of the Quest. This is a trailhead, the call to adventure, an opportunity to effect a change in the world. What's out there may feel new and unfamiliar, but there is an intense feeling of purpose. This valley presents a time for opening to possibility, a time to balance the will to act with trust in what may want to unfold organically. Good morning. It's okay, Joanne. I know the whole thing with the phone where you hit it first. This card may refer to shedding skins, new contracts, travel, or occupying more public spaces. Oh, you're using a TV remote. Okay. Well, that's actually impressive. That you're able to comment with a TV remote. I'm not actually good. I'm never able to do that. All right. So Valley of the Quest, new beginnings here. Okay. We have new beginnings. We are moving into a new and unfamiliar space. And yeah, when we move into something new and unfamiliar, there's always this kind of feeling of trepidation, I guess. We kind of go in and we think like, oh, well, what, we always immediately go to what's going to go wrong. Oh, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What if I've forgotten this? What if I've forgotten that? What if, I don't have this now? What is, what's going to happen to me now that I don't have X or Y, right? So there's a sense of moving into a new place. And I know certainly for the readings we've had over the last month or recently, the Valley of the Quest has to do with, it seems to connect to this, not only new beginnings, but public spaces. Now, if you remember in astrology, the area of public spaces is the 10th house, and the 10th house is Saturn again. We've been talking a lot about Saturn lately. In fact, I had a client in the house yesterday who was really drawn to like Saturn type jewelry, which I thought was really interesting. We were talking about that yesterday. And there's a, there just seems to be this thing. And to me, when Saturn appears, it can mean different things for different people, obviously, depending on where Saturn is in your chart, what your connection, what your relationship is. And Saturn currently is transiting Pisces and is also going to be moving into Aries. So that's something for late May. So I don't know if I feel like Saturn typically comes up when we're finishing up karmas, when we are, paying off debts, moving into, looking at what we're doing and trying to structure things kind of slowly and carefully. Saturn also, being that Saturn is connected to time, I feel like Saturn also has to do with being willing to wait for things to reach their appropriate stage of development. Because when we start something, I've said this probably many times, when we start something, we kind of feel like, oh, I'm starting and, and then we move into something new. We have a lot of enthusiasm and we may not see a whole lot of results right away. And we do live kind of in an instant gratification society. We do live in this place where we want to, we feel a strong need to, if we don't see immediate results, then we get discouraged and we go, well, I don't have time for this. So we kind of walk away from it. And again, probably this is a byproduct of how fast the world moves now. Everything moves very, very fast. Change happens very, very fast. And we really, as at least our consciousness has a hard time keeping up with this. When things moving around you very, very fast, it's hard to really sit down and absorb what's really happening around us. So for me, it's kind of like, yeah, this may be a case. Saturn may be telling us to slow down, maybe telling us that it's time to make sure that we're really looking at what we're doing. And as we're moving into a new space, and Saturn sometimes is also about the way in which we correct things, there may be a sense of, okay, slow down, look at what you're doing, and make sure you're not just automatically, because again, when you have to act fast, you act from instinct, right? You act immediately or from habit. What is the they say the knee jerk thing? What is the thing that you do that you automatically jump into? So the fact that we're seeing this, it's like, okay, new beginnings, new opportunities, good time to be able to sit and, what you call it? This is a good time to be able to use all of the experience that you have with something and create a new path for yourself. You don't want to necessarily throw everything that's old out. Okay. I think sometimes in a period of new beginning, we think it's like an all or nothing. And I think, again, there's a cliche for that, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? You don't want to throw out what has proven to be useful. And sometimes, yeah, we're trying to sort through what's useful and what's not useful, what's real, what's not real. And that's not always an easy thing to to determine. But when you're at the beginning, it's kind of like, okay, it's almost like saying stop and look around you. Okay, look around you, see what's happening. But okay, the kind of seeming paradox of that is that at the same time you don't want to overanalyze where you are, because once the mind gets involved, it invents all kinds of outcomes and scenarios and things which aren't always helpful. Sometimes all they do is overwhelm us, and then we're just kind of afraid to move ahead. So it's more like stopping and letting yourself feel what's going on, if that makes sense. Kind of like, what are your instincts telling you? What is your intuition telling you? What is how are you feeling about what's going on? And I think also, but we also need to separate that from what might be fear or habit or trepidation. Because sometimes when we're moving into something new, we're like, oh, I don't want to do that. You know, like kind of like, I don't want to go there. But, you know, I know that we feel that, or when we procrastinate things, we're like, well, you know, I'm going to keep putting this off because, oh, I know that's something I need to do. I'll get there. The question then becomes, yeah, like, what are we doing? What actions are we taking? How do we begin? How do we begin? And if you feel you're too overwhelmed, then you really need to take a step back and just focus on doing things one step at a time. Now, our other card that we have, interestingly, kind of connected to what I was saying here, is surrender. Okay. And I love these cards. I think these cards are beautiful with the birds on them. But this card is called surrender. And the meaning of that card is, I think this one is in, yeah, here we go. Okay. The landscape of life is forever shifting. Lay back and let the water take you down the winding river. Are you afraid of what will happen if you let go of control? For now, don't fight, just float. This is faith in action. And it's interesting. We've been talking about faith versus belief over the last week, right? Because when we are taught a set of beliefs and we have a story and a narrative and we believe the way certain things are, a lot of times we try to shoehorn our ideas into the square peg in the round hole. I'm full of cliches today. I don't know what the heck that's about. But the square, you know, it's kind of like we're sometimes when we have a certain belief, as we're negotiating it, we try to see how it fits. And honestly, this is how syncretism works. When people talk about religions or the way in which religions change over time or beliefs change over time, it can often start with, you know, there's one set of beliefs, but as you encounter more new things, we're talking about integrating. How do we, not necessarily always assimilation, because assimilation always implies that you have, your beliefs have been absorbed into somebody else's culture or belief or social thing, you know. But it's more like how you integrate that. Like, how do you synthesize that? How do you find it and say, where does this fit? But surrender suggests that we allow life to take us where we need to go right now. And in this idea of surrender, it's the idea that we want to, we just kind of want to, when you're in this new space, it's almost like, yeah, you're at the beginning. We want to think more carefully, but we also just want to, it's not that we have to keep planning our next move. It's like, okay, just go out there and see what happens, right? And go with the flow of whatever happens. And trust your ability to do that. Because I think a lot of the times when we try to overplan something, it's because we don't trust ourselves to do it right, or we're worried that we're going to look stupid, or we're worried that we're going to F it up because, oh, I forgot about this important thing, right? So it's interesting. There's, in the strong energies that are here right now, you know, there's definitely what we're pointing to here is this idea of this beginning space. And in this beginning space, we may just have to surrender to what is, because we're still kind of, Pisces is really about surrender, right? So we're kind of between Pisces, Aries. There's this sense that we need to stay at the beginning, but there's still areas where we have to surrender because we still don't have all the information, or we have to wait for the information to come to us. And typically speaking, if people say, well, you know, yeah, well, how do I know how to do that? You know, how do I know when I'm doing it right? How do I know when if I'm perceiving it right? You know, because the 12th house is also about self-doubt. You know, it's the place where our intuition tells us things, but that's also where we go, I don't know, really? I don't know. I don't really know about that. Like, That's where we may hear that inner voice and be a little critical of it, which is not always bad, because the 12th house sometimes also has to do with deception as well, the ways in which we can deceive ourselves. And again, that gets back to what it's saying about belief and faith. If belief is the truth, is what we insist it to be, if I say, well, and fixed signs tend to do this, or earth signs tend to do this a lot, where it's just kind of like, nope, this is the way it is, and I interpret everything along the line of that thing that I believe. So whatever's happening, this is why sometimes we will look at things when we receive readings, or the whole idea of the oracle. And when you can interpret something one way or the other, the way you interpret it may, you want to make sure it's not based on a belief that you are clinging to that maybe is not appropriate anymore. Or maybe it's not that it's totally inappropriate, but that you want to stay open to what's new. Excuse me. And so a good example of this, I'll go back to, well, this is an example of what I mean when I say that. In ancient Greece, there was an oracle. There was a king of Lydia, I think it was, who was going to go to war with his neighbor. I think Solon was ruling the neighboring country. And so he went to the oracle at Delphi and said, I'm looking to make war. Because he's thinking, he's trying to increase his empire, right? I'm going to go make war. And so he goes to the oracle, and the oracle says, if you go to war, you will destroy a great nation. And so this guy thought, great, because in his mind, he's very confident in the army, the ability. That's great. That means I'm going to go and I'm going to kill it. And that nation's going to be, I'm going to conquer it. It's going to be under my control. Well, he did go to war. And what happened was that he destroyed his own country. His own country fell and became under was conquered by Solon. And so, yeah, it was a question of, really, you could have read that oracle either way. You have a great nation, you could be destroying your own, right? So, yeah, there's the way in which we look at things. And sometimes, I think sometimes too, even when we do like readings and stuff for ourselves, it's why if I feel like there's something that I'm very, very attached to and I'm doing a reading for myself on it, if I'm looking at the cards and saying, I could read this either way, then that's typically when I want to call somebody else for a reading, because I'm too attached to this. I have a belief about this. I have a thought about how this is going to come out. So, getting out, the other person who's doing the reading for me, and typically, I don't know, it depends. I have friends where we'll read for each other kind of mutually and have for years. But sometimes I will actually even pay somebody else for a reading because that person is not attached to me or my situation. And therefore, they're just going to look at the cards and they're going to look at it. I mean, again, I have had cases where you'll have readers who are too attached to their own worldview. Like I remember, for example, I went to see a very, very famous psychic medium who when I talk about moving to the UK, she's like, oh, why do you want to move there? I don't like people from there. I'm like, okay. So literally she went and tried to interpret my entire reading. She's like, no, I think you're going to move to Florida. I'm like, I would poke my own eyeballs out before I moved to Florida. I don't want to live in Florida for a lot of reasons. I don't like hot weather. I don't like humidity. And I don't like wildlife that's the size of aircraft carriers. I mean, just for starters. So no, I'm never going to be moving to Florida. And, but she wanted to move to Florida. So occasionally you can have that happen. And that really should not be a thing. But that's just kind of, but that's typically speaking, most readers, and certainly any readers that I have been going to, if I go to somebody more than once, it's typically somebody who I feel I'm going to get a good, fair, practical assessment from them. It's not going to be somebody who's going to try to tell me what I want to hear. It's not somebody who's going to be projecting what they think I should be doing onto the reading, which is usually the mark of a good reader, is somebody who's just telling you what they see. And ultimately what you do with that information is up to you. It's not somebody, I'm not like, when I read for people, I'm not there to tell them what to do with their lives. I'm there to tell you, this is the information, and you do that with it what makes sense for you. Or, sometimes There's been cases when I've given people and they go, oh, no, I don't want to, you know, well, like the hairstylist that gives you the same style that they have. Yeah, exactly. I know it would look great on you. And then you end up looking like them and you're going, It's really funny you mentioned that, Suda, because when I was growing up, the hairdresser that my mother always took me to was a woman who did kind of just that. When I wanted to, you know, this was the 80s. And of course, you know, the 80s was what? The big hair, the feathered hair, all that kind of stuff, all of it, which I, you know, in retrospect, I'm just like, why? But in any case, at the time, it was stylish. But inevitably, what I saw every woman who walked out of there with the same haircut. And to me, it was like almost like an old lady haircut. I'm like, I don't want this woman cutting my hair because I'm going to walk out looking like these people. And I happen to like my hair long, you know? I don't want short hair. She'd be like, oh, maybe you should just cut your hair short. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But you're right. And you're right. It's kind of like finding a stylist too. Who's a stylist who's actually going to listen to you and do the thing that you want, right? But and we think that with a lot of things, doctors, you know, particularly doctors for women, particularly like gynecologists and stuff. You want somebody who you feel very, very comfortable with. But I think in terms of readers, you want to find somebody who's not going to just tell you what you want to hear, because I don't feel like that's in a certain situation. And if we find that we're being told kind of the same thing and we're very, very resistant to it, we might want to say, well, is this an area where, is it that person's wrong and that, you know, no, this is a deeply held belief and I need to hang on to it? Or is it just that this is where, you know, in my mind, I'm obstructing change? And Suda says your readings are spot on. Oh, thank you. Okay, well, good. Yeah, I just tend to read. I've had people, I remember when I used to do the, you know, do them by sign, which I just don't have time for anymore. I would love to go back to doing some kind of readings on this channel. Maybe even if I just did them monthly or every couple of weeks or something like that. But at some point I'll get back to that. But I had one woman come on and say to me, oh, you don't tell a story when you read, so you don't know how to read. And I said, I'm not here to tell you stories. I'm here to tell you what the cards say. And obviously when you're doing a general reading, yeah, I mean, I could do readings that say like, oh, this is about your love life, or this is about, you know, and sometimes that comes up very prominently. But if I'm doing readings largely for people who are like married with kids, like, you know, I mean, yeah, I guess sometimes people are looking for a new relationship, but frequently they're not. Frequently it's like, or they're just people in the place in their life. They're like, yeah, I'm not looking for that right now. And a lot of people who watch my readings are like that. So if I try to say like, oh, okay, this reading means this for love or whatever, which is what a lot of these readings do. They tend to focus on love and they tend to focus on career, which is fine. I mean, let's be real. A lot of people tune into YouTube tarot readings because that's what they want to know about. They want to know, oh, I'm making a move or a change. You know, what do I need to know about that? Or I've met somebody new, or I want to know what's going on with my relationship. And you know, and that's fine. But if that's not where you're at, I'm not going to interpret this fifth and seventh house in terms of who are you going to, you know, who's your new boyfriend going to be when you're not, when that's not what you're looking for at all. So I try to read and say, okay, if this is what you're looking for, this is probably what this means. If this is not what you're looking for, like if that's not in the equation, this is the other things that this can mean, because cards can mean different things in places. There's not one fixed meaning of what cards mean, and they're going to mean different things in relation to each other, as people who are taking my tarot classes certainly know. And the more you practice with it, the more you will see that it's not black and white. You know, there's not this one way to look at it. But okay, but the point being is that sometimes when I feel I'm looking at something and going, okay, I'm way too attached to the outcome of this, then sometimes I need somebody else to give me a perspective that I can then see where that fits in. And that's what I think, sometimes we need to do that. And by the way, I'm not necessarily doing that as a plug for my readings. I think there's lots of, you know, people, again, like Suda's saying about hairdressers, you know, but I just think about it more as when you find somebody who you're comfortable with or who you resonate with, not all readers will resonate with you either. Sometimes I have gone to like police detective psychics, for example, who have really, really good reputations and, like, you know, finding missing people and stuff like that. And when I have a reading from them, it's like they were completely off. But it's not that they were they were terrible or they suck or whatever. It's that for whatever reason we're not connecting. Nice as the person was, it wasn't like, oh, I don't like them or whatever. There's for some reason there's just not a connection there, and that can happen. So that's why I say it's always good. Or sometimes people are not giving you the type of information that you're looking for. Some readers are better at kind of more broad psychological strokes. The tarot class on Saturday was awesome. Learned a lot. Can't wait to practice the new spread. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you, or thank you actually. Thank you and you're welcome. It's like, yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed that. I think that spread is very useful for figuring things out. And I have another really good one for the next time we do a tarot workshop as well that I would like to have done, but you know, I'm kind of thinking with the group, we only tend to get through one at a time, which is okay because everybody's learning. So yeah, so sometimes people want more just of that kind of a thing. Sometimes people are looking for more concrete answers, which tarot may or may not be able to give them. Okay. Tarot can't always, like people who say to me, like, when am I going to get married, for instance? Well, you know what? Tarot really can't tell you that. I mean, it might give you an idea or a time frame. Yeah, some readers are all doom and gloom. Yeah, it's interesting. And what's interesting about doom and gloom readers is that sometimes the reason that they're doom and gloom is because, well, some of them have a shtick. I need someone who's borderline rude. Just tell me like it is. Haha, is what Alex says. Well, you want somebody who's very direct, right? But at the same time, yeah, you can cross over into a territory where it's just kind of like, oh, all these cards are bad. You know, you're really effing up and da da da. And you know what? That's not necessarily even true. I've seen readers do that to people, and all that ends up doing is making a person scared to death that something terrible is going to happen to them. When you have the readers that I try to call, I'm going to call them like boardwalk readers. Okay, I'm gonna shy away from other adjectives. I'm going to call them boardwalk readers. The ones where you have a woman who comes in with the crystal ball, like she's trying to look like the stereotypical, and she comes in and she says, oh, I see this dark cloud over you, and I see this and that. Now, I'm not saying this person isn't necessarily psychic. Like for years, that's what I was always told. There's a dark cloud over you. I'm like, yeah, that's Saturn, actually. That's the energy over my 12th house that is not letting you see anything about me. And that's kind of a thing with me. It was for years. It's only recently that that's not been so much of a thing. And it doesn't mean that I can't get accurate readings. But then it was like, and that means you have this terrible thing over you. And unless you pay me, oh, it's from India. Oh, thank you. I'm glad, you know, thank you. And thank you for joining us today. Yeah, I feel like it's, yeah, there's the doom and gloom thing. And, you know, like I remember some of them I remember like, oh, my 7 Holy Spirits will remove. I'm like, yeah, no, they won't. Bye. Because those people are scammers. They're just there. And what I don't like about some of those readers who to me are not authentic and they make everybody else look bad, okay, who is authentically reading. Because when they read, it's like they're fortune tellers in the truest sense. And sometimes people go in because they want to know, like, oh, you know, who am I going to meet and this and that. And a lot of times when people go for readings, because readings are supposed to be for entertainment, okay? That's legally, they're supposed to be for entertainment. I can't give you advice from tarot and say this is an absolute guarantee that this is what you're doing with your life. So legally, you have to represent it as for entertainment purposes only. And you will see this especially in other countries. Oh my God, yeah, well, scammers. There's lots of them out there. So you have to have your kind of radar up if you go to somebody like that. But you know, when you generally see somebody with like a neon sign saying, you know, Madam whoever, a true whatever, just happened to me, as you know. Oh, Joanne, yeah, yeah, and it's happened. And sometimes these are people who are recommended by other people. Sometimes people will say, oh my God, I went and they know stuff about me. And you know what? Again, I'm not saying these people don't have any ability, but they try to use it to scam people out of money. I remember watching, what was it? Unsolved Mysteries at one point, maybe it was. It was that one with Robert Stack back in the 80s. I think that was the one. But there was one where they were searching for this woman who, and she did unfortunately try to kind of meet the stereotype of the fortune teller. But there was a woman who had lost her husband and was devastated and lonely and went to the psychic, and this woman was telling her, oh, you know, the reason your husband died is because you're cursed, and you know, and like, you have to believe in me. And they'll do that. They kind of get very butch, like, oh, you have to believe in me. And I'm like, I'm like, I look them right in the face like this, and they go, well, I can see that you're not a, like, like you're, they'll say some kind of a thing like, you're going to be deceived or something like that. I'm like, yeah, if I do what you tell me, I'm going to be deceived. I'm very good. And once you learn to read too, it's funny if you go to these people and they lay a card down and they'll go, this card means that you must do this. And I look at it and I go, no, it doesn't. I'm like, no, actually what that card means. And so you kind of sit there and you look it over yourself and you go, oh, okay. So at the very least, if they're laying cards down for you, you might get a good idea of what you what the answer should be, even if they don't tell you. So yeah, it's kind of funny. But if you have somebody who's good, and there are actually a lot of good people out there, at some point I think I want to put together like a list. I mean, because again, obviously, I'm a terrible marketing person, because I'm like, yeah, you should come to me for readings. But I also recognize that maybe my style isn't for everybody. So it's like, okay, so you have some options. Who else might you want to go to, who I have been to, and I think, yeah, this person's not BSing you, and yes, this person is legit. But everybody's approach is different. Some people, they're not willing to get into those subjects at all, and they're like, no. Like I think of my friend, Gina, who used to work at, I used to work with. When she does readings, it's not, if somebody comes in and says, oh, I want to know when I'm going to meet my husband, she's like, no, let's just talk about working on you. like she will take that approach. She's not interested in the outcome driven stuff. Let's talk about why this is important for you. So, and again, if that's not what somebody's looking for, I don't know. I've had that too. People come to me and go like, well, why can't you channel this message from this person? This, I'm like, because that's not what I do. I read cards. I'm not here to suddenly, start channeling your grandma or whatever. I don't do that. And that's not really, and again, everybody, we've talked about this with energy healers and stuff too. Like people will add extra things in and people assume that that is what that is, and it can give a wrong impression of what these things are. Like my sister, who joined us this week in the tarot class, she's starting to read because she saw a psychotherapist who's actually starting to read. A lot of psychotherapists actually use tarot because there's a very strong, it's very good for if you can take a step back from it and look at it for what it is, not overanalyze it, but look at it for what it is, and just say, okay, this is telling me something about what's going on inside of me that maybe I'm not acknowledging. So, and speaking of, we're going to do our Osho Zen reading now. Yeah, that took an interesting direction today, but our readings, but yeah, let's see what we've got here. I guess the point of everything I was saying before, by the way, is just that, yeah, we're in a new space. And so there's a certain amount of, caution and pre-thinking, but also not overthinking. That's always the challenge, because we always tend to overthink stuff. Oh, that's just so funny. I'm talking about this. Let's, okay. So our cards for today, we got a couple of twos. So we're talking about being on the threshold of something new, right? And we're starting with the possibilities card, the Two of Wands. Now, this is a nice interpretation of this card. I got the Two of Wands. I got somebody this weekend. I got the Two of Wands. The Two of Wands comes up when it's decision time. You have the world in your hand normally in the Rider-Waite deck. And it's like, okay, now I'm looking out. What are the possibilities? Literally, what are the possibilities? It's the card of dominion. But the person stands alone. Who am I going to connect with? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? What am I going to do next? And this is almost like standing on the mountaintop, standing on Tiferet, if you like Kabbalah, and looking down and seeing, okay, what are the possibilities? Now, interestingly, one of the things about standing on the mountaintop, figuratively speaking, and looking at your possibilities, is that you're not able to see the details. I have a card in my own deck called A View from a Hill, which I kind of connect to that. And when, in my own Oracle deck, and the view from a hill means like, yeah, you're on the mountaintop and you can see the big picture, but you don't necessarily see the fine details of the path. So that's always something to remember. And again, twos are at the beginning. The inner feeling of which we're unaware. Okay, we have the Six of Wands here. So yeah, there's definitely a sense of accomplishment here. I think there's a sense here that internally we may be giving ourselves more credit for what we've actually achieved, okay? But of course, the other thing about the success card is that it's something that it's a moment, okay? We have a moment of success. Gorgeous illustration. Yes, this is somebody who's riding the tiger, so to speak. Speaking of more cliches. Yeah, so they're riding the tiger. And like, yeah, you have your moment, you have your little victory parade, you have your moment, right? But it's a moment. And then when we have that moment, then we have to move on. We move on to other things, or we move back to ordinary life or whatever. So it's kind of like we've had our moment, and we'll have other moments, but it's kind of like, well, okay, there may be kind of a reflection on that. And I think it's good to try to access what you've achieved, because often in a new space, we only worry about maybe where we've failed before, or where we've, where we could potentially fail. There's a sense of looking at what we've achieved. And the external feeling, of which we are aware, is the Three of Wands. So we've got 3 fire cards in a row here, experiencing. Now, this is an interesting interpretation of the Three of Wands, because the Three of Wands is more about collaboration. So you've been moving from 2 to 3 here, right? And the 3 is, so that's getting out of the space of possibility and trying to experience something, trying to manifest something. So that's now this shows a woman communing with a tree, so this has more to do with nature, but this is where we are putting our feelers out. In the Rider Waite deck, it's you watch the ship coming in. Oh, okay, on my phone now, needed to get coffee. Okay. Yeah, I know. Sometimes I watch live streams on the TV as well, but I have no dexterity with using a remote, for that. So experiencing. Okay. So this is you, this is the way that moving from possibility to manifestation, right? Moving from where our ideas to how are we going to make our ideas manifest? Who are we going to collaborate with? When our ship comes in, what does it look like, right? What opportunities have we selected, and what are we going to choose to experience? So the fact that this is coming up in the external, we may have some idea at this point about where we're going, and so again, I think it's saying in this space of possibility to start is that we want to think about our possibilities. We want to think about where we've been and where we're going, and where, and base that more confidently on our ability to lead, on our ability to do, because sometimes people will look at something, get extremely overwhelmed and say, oh my gosh, there's too much here. I can't do it. Or that's why we put it off, because it feels like it's too much. Like our energy level isn't up to doing that much stuff, right? So we kind of back away. Now, here's the thing. Here's our advice card. If we reflect on everything we just said, is the Two of Swords. Okay. They call this the schizophrenia card, which isn't a particularly accurate definition of schizophrenia, but it does have to do with the idea of feeling split. Okay, that's what they're really trying to convey here. Split would probably be a better word. But you see the person who's hanging between two things, right? Between the green and the red. The green you could think of potentially as the Anahata chakra, the heart. The red could have more to do with the root chakra, the Muladhara. So the root has to do with our, our survival instinct, right? What we connect to, what we need to survive. And the heart space. So that's a little more. I'm going to say, I don't like using these phrases exactly, but what we would call more animalistic. Something that's more about our just general drive to live, our instincts, that kind of thing, rather than what we're feeling in our heart. Rather being just kind of driven by what we need to survive, rather than where our heart is. So this is about feeling like we have to choose between those two things. And what this card is saying is you don't have to choose between those two things. You kind of drop in that space, and you trust, because whichever side of the equation is more important, if you're in a situation where you need to survive, your survival instincts will kick in. But generally speaking, it's good to, if we're operating from the heart space, then we're more in the flow. We're more in the flow of the society that we live in, right? Our outcome card it's the Emperor, but this is the card marked as the Rebel. So what is this? This is a man who is holding his torch here, and you're noticing that there are chains at the bottom that are broken. Okay, So this is about breaking the chains. It's a different kind of view of the emperor, because typically when we think of the emperor, we think of somebody who's about rules and structure, and but it is Aries energy. It is Aries energy, okay? So we have that kind of idea of a new beginning. But the emperor is the person who normally is the one who enforces the rules of society, if we think about it in a more traditional sense. This is portraying the emperor as the rebel. This is the one who says, no, I'm going to use my successes. I'm going to use my ability to lead. I'm going to look at my possibilities, and I'm going to rebel. We're kind of waffling between, this is like a waffling between like, do I, don't I, do I, don't I? The rebel says, and it's not that a rebellion doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm just going to go out there and say F everybody and everything. And, rebellion is sometimes just an act of, you know what, I'm going to dare to be true to myself. I'm going to dare to be true to what works for me. I'm not going to waffle between what I think other people expect of me and who I really am. Because ultimately, I think a lot of times we think that, okay, yes, this is who I really am. This is what I really want to do. Oh, but I can't do that because I have to think about this, or I have to worry about this, or if I do this, maybe I'll lose my job, or this will happen, or that'll happen, or this person won't like me. This is more about rebelling against those things that make us feel ashamed to be who we are. Okay? Shame might be part of it, or just feeling that what we want to be is somehow not adequate, not enough. Oh, thanks for that clarification. You're welcome. Yeah, it's like who you are. Okay. You're not, a lot of times we have some kind of a limiting belief, whether it's around shame or whether it's around just feeling that we are, that somehow we are limited. Even if we're not ashamed of ourselves, we may feel like, oh yeah, well, that's what I'd like to do, but I can't. And the question then becomes, well, okay, sometimes there are practical factors that say you can't right now. But the question is, okay, well, then how might I think about this differently? What might I need to change if I want to get there? And do I have to just do things the way everybody tells me it has to be done? The rebel sometimes means like, yeah, think outside the box, get outside of what's normal. Imagine something that seems absurd and ludicrous to you, and say, when you think, well, that's stupid, why would you do that? But I don't know. Sometimes you want to think about those things, and it's like, I don't know, could it be done that way? Maybe not, but or maybe. Sometimes we tell ourselves that things can't be done a certain way because of some self-limiting beliefs. So I don't know. I think this is a time of examination. We are only at the beginning of something. So again, not as there's a sense here of kind of surrendering to what is. And I think it's more like, it's almost like the adventure card. Let's allow ourselves to see what's happening here. And again, there always seems to be, like, certainly my guides seem to always be trying to see, like, for heaven's sakes, put an element of joy into it. We always tend to go look at everything like, like you're in a horror movie, and, and you're just waiting for whatever to jump out of the doors. It's more like, no, go forth, go through joyfully, and who cares what's there? Just go, and still be you, and dare to be what you feel is authentic to you. So anyway, we're 8:18, so I'm gonna close this for now. Thank you guys for joining me this morning. I should be back tomorrow morning. Wish me luck tonight. It's my first class. I'm not too concerned about it, but we'll see how my students take my personality at the end of the day, because the way I am here is pretty much the way I am there. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, I hope all of you have a great Monday, great start to your week, and I will be back with you guys